All thoughts and opinions expressed on WRHU's Queerly Informed do not reflect the views of Hofstra University, the Board of Trustees, or Radio Hofstra University. All contrasting thoughts or suggestions can be sent to programming at wrhu.org or to room 127 Herbert Hall, 111 Hofstra University, Hempstead, New York, 11549.
Welcome to the 9th installation of Season 4 of Queerly Informed.
I'm Summer Savaria.
And I'm Xia Tuttle.
And we'll have all the latest in international, national, and local LGBTQ news.
The Trump administration agrees to fly pride flags again above Stonewall National Monument.
Senegal convicts a man under an anti-LGBTQ+ law to 6 years in prison.
The country of Belarus groups LGBTQ+ people with pedophiles under a new anti-propaganda law.
And more.
In queer entertainment, I'm Bryana Neff with more on Chelsea Manning and Hari Neff, Dave Chappelle, and Ruby Rose's allegations of sexual assault against Katy Perry.
For Gay History, I am Brooklyn Dottin. We have more on a sip-in at Julius's Bar in 1966. Stay tuned to find out more.
For your QI Sports Report, I'm Kaylee Desmarais with more on the queer women heading to the Basketball Hall of Fame.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into the headlines. 2 months after its controversial removal, the rainbow pride flag is set to return to the Stonewall Monument in New York City. Following its initial removal by the Trump administration, several LGBTQ+ nonprofit organizations filed a lawsuit in response. As a resolution, the pride flag will now return to the historical site alongside an American flag and the flag of the National Park Service. The flag is now protected, with the resolution stating, quote, "The pride flag will remain hanging at Stonewall and will not be removed, save for maintenance or other practical purposes." This resolution, however, does not provide similar closure to the Trump administration's erasure of transgender history at the monument.
I hate to say that this is like a win, because I feel like we look for any small win that we can today with all of the bad news that we're hearing in the United States surrounding queer people. I hate that it's like sort of a begrudging thing, like, oh, we can have a pride flag up at this important monument for queer people. But I'm glad that it is now protected. Something that I do think is interesting, though, is that there's still, despite the fact that there's a pride flag there now, there's still censorship about what they're allowed to say. So there's still the removal of like the words transgender or like mentions of bisexuality on the website for Stonewall, which I find really interesting, that now we're acknowledging that this is a queer monument, but we're still erasing parts of the community and not fully acknowledging them.
And then the other thing that's sort of happening here is when they agreed to have these flags come back, it was under the, condition that the American flag is right in the center. Like, that's the center flag now. And then we get these pride flags on either side of them, and then the, National Park Service flag as well on the sides. But it's like, it's transforming from this like very queer-centric monument to then this like America First thing. And I don't know, it's just tough because it's like they did agree to bring it back, but it's sort of like they're doing the bare minimum that they're, able to without, facing more controversy. I mean, the only reason it's returned now is because of this big lawsuit that happened.
I mean, yeah, the fact that there's still there's still such an erasure of trans people is just because that wasn't mentioned in the lawsuit, because they don't have to do it. The fight is not over just because there is a rainbow flag at Stonewall. There is still so much work to be done. There's still so much protection needed for the trans community in this time. And and like Bryana said, I hate to call this a small victory, but I mean, it is a small victory. We need to this is just winning a fight. We still have not won the war yet. On April 10th, a 24-year-old Senegalese man was sentenced to 6 years in prison and a $3,300 fine for breaking Senegal's newly toughened anti-LGBTQ+ laws, which Human Rights Watch researchers Larissa Kojue says has created, quote, constant fear for queer people in Senegal. Kojue said in an interview with the Associated Press, criminalizing same-sex conduct and arresting people for their sexual orientation or gender expression violates multiple internationally protected rights, including to equality and non-discrimination. The legislation was passed a month ago by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye after an overwhelming majority support by the National Assembly. The legislation doubled the maximum penalty for same-sex acts from 5 to 10 years. The law also introduced sentences between 3 to 7 years for what they call promotion or financing of homosexuality. Something interesting that comes up when you look into Senegal's seemingly toughened anti-LGBTQ laws is the fact that it comes from the fact that the country is majority Muslim and where same-sex acts are still framed as an act against nature. The deliberate connection between religion and the state is something that directly affects and hurts the queer community there. And I think that we need to keep that kind of connection and the dangers of those kind of connections in mind when we look at not only Senegal, but also America when the administration talks a lot about Christian values. And I mean, we have a story coming up where we have another leader talking about anti-LGBTQ acts in the name of what they call Christian values.
Yeah, I feel like it's a part of this just major sort of international wave of the weaponization of religion against marginalized groups. And queer people, unfortunately, just happen to become an easy target for them. And it's sad to see. This past Wednesday, April 15th, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko signed a new law into effect that groups homosexuality and gender transition alongside pedophilia. This law serves to ban, quote, propaganda of LGBTQ plus identities, which will put this already vulnerable group in a worse position. The prominent international nonprofit and non-governmental organization Human Rights Watch has pointed out the resemblance between this move and recent legislation changes in Russia, where very similar anti-propaganda laws have been used to restrict and silence the voices of their people. With this mirroring between the two places, there is worry that Belarus could follow in Russia's footsteps to further criminalize the LGBTQ identity, leading to more violence against this already marginalized community. Belarus legislature has stood rigid, saying the laws come as a defense of, quote, traditional values. Something I want to emphasize with this one is this idea, this notion of propaganda in this legislation change. It's very, very vague and like intentionally vague. And so a major worry that, I definitely had when I was reading through this was like, because it's so vague, this will be a lot easier for them to manipulate and apply to different people that, maybe wouldn't fit a more rigid, I guess, definition. And it's also tough because like one of the sanctions listed, like one of the punishments or whatever, the consequences of, being queer is like detention. So they can just detain anybody who's sort of promoting this notion of what they vaguely say is propaganda about LGBTQ people. And I think that that's just really tough to see because it's really vague. And it also is pretty much exactly what Russia had done in 2024. And so it's just like, eek, this is tough, guys.
I mean, something really scary about this is that this law follows a recent one that classified depictions of LGBTQ as pornographic in nature, and that word being constantly tied to just the existence of queer people is so terrifying because it makes it so forcing that constant tie of LGBTQ people and pornographic just further makes it easy to criminalize them just existing in public. It's not pornographic for a queer person to live. It's not pornographic for a queer person to just exist in the world or even love another person. That's not pornographic. But the fact that we've seen countless times people connect the two and kind of force this cemented connection between the two, it's so scary to see. It's so scary to see it continue to be solidified.
Next up, we have our entertainment and history reports with Bryana Neff and Brooklyn Dottin.
Queer actress Hari Neff and activist Chelsea Manning were recently arrested at a protest in New York City run by Jewish Voices for Peace, demanding that Senators Chuck Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand vote to block sales of U.S. weapons to the Israeli military. The demonstration, which took place on April 13th, consisted of protesters sitting outside the senators' offices and stalling traffic. Out of the 300 people in attendance at the protest, over 100 were arrested. Manning wrote in a statement to Newsweek saying, quote, "Our actions matter in shaping the course of history, and the cruelties of war are not inevitable." Comedian Dave Chappelle has recently stirred some controversy after making the claim that his jokes at the expense of the transgender community are different than the anti-trans jokes made by Republican politicians, even going as far to say that the GOP is, quote, "weaponizing what he was doing." In a recent interview with NPR, Chappelle lamented his frustrations with the Republican Party's negative rhetoric surrounding the trans community, while simultaneously defending his own. Examples of jokes that have gotten Chappelle in trouble over the past few years are him declaring that he supports J.K. Rowling on, quote, Team TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, as well as one where he asked to be sentenced to a women's prison. These jokes have lost Chappelle a significant amount of support within the comedy community. Despite these many controversies, Chappelle maintains the position that he, quote, "doesn't feel that anything he does is malicious or even harmful." However, he still outspokenly denounces anti-trans messaging from the Republican Party, claiming that what they say and believe concerning trans people is in no way similar to his comedy. Katy Perry is under investigation from the Australian government after Orange is the New Black actress Ruby Rose alleged that Perry had assaulted her at a Melbourne club 20 years ago. Perry herself has not commented on the situation, but her representative told Variety that, quote, "The allegations being circulated on social media by Ruby Rose about Katy Perry are not only categorically false, but they are dangerous and reckless lies." The representative also went on to claim that Rose is not a reliable source concerning this topic, alleging, quote, "Miss Rose has a well-documented history of making serious public allegations on social media against various individuals, claims that have been repeatedly denied by those named." While the investigation unfolds, Rose said that she would no longer be publicly speaking about the case or any individuals involved at the request of law enforcement. She told Variety, quote, "It's going to look like I'm ignoring everything from supportive messages to other people's experiences, but I'm not. This is a standard request from the police, and in many ways, quite the relief." For your Queerly Informed Entertainment Break, I'm Bryana Neff.
This week in Queer Past, a group of activists sip in at a New York City bar. In the 1960s, drinking while being gay in public was considered illegal in New York State, and any bar or restaurant could be raided if there was, quote, disorderly conduct. The disorderly conduct in question included men flirting or buying each other drinks. Kissing was also deemed disorderly. 3 men from New York City's chapter of homophile organization Mattachine Society, Dick Leitch, Craig Rodwell, and John Timmons, aimed to challenge that law in court. The men brought reporters to the first bar they tried, planning to have the reporters cover whatever happened at the bar. After 3 other locations, on April 21st, 1966, they, along with a man named Randy Wicker, walked into Julius's bar, a block away from the more well-known Stonewall Inn in New York. This time, the bartender denied the men service after they revealed that they were gay. In 1967, the courts ruled that disorderly conduct had to entail more than mere same-sex interactions, like touching and kissing, and that gay people could legally drink in bars, although it would take longer for openly gay bars to be able to obtain liquor licenses. For your Queerly Informed History lesson, I am Brooklyn Dottin.
Thank you to Bryana Neff and Brooklyn Dottin for those reports. Viktor Orban, Hungarian Prime Minister, has been ousted by his oppositional leader in a landslide victory. Orban has had a history of attacks on LGBTQ+ rights in Hungary and was supported by President Donald Trump, with Vice President J.D. Vance recently traveling to Hungary in order to help campaign for Orban. Orban has passed a law in June of 2021 under the guise of, quote, anti-pedophilia that limited public discussion of LGBTQ+ lives and identities, banning media and schools from discussing LGBTQ+ identities, and requiring sex education workers to register with the government to prevent them from promoting representation of specific sexual orientations. While many LGBTQ+ people are glad Orban is on the out, many are still concerned about Peter Magyar, soon to be Prime Minister, as he has not taken any clear stance on LGBTQ+ rights or overturning the harmful legislation Orban enacted.
So the rhetoric that we see Viktor Orban sort of pushing here and was pushing when he was Prime Minister of Hungary is something that I feel like we see a lot and that we talked about with our previous story as well, is that LGBTQ identities are often tied to sexuality and seen as like an inherently sexual thing. And a lot of times they're looped in with like pedophilia and I guess like a danger to children because people do see it as inherently sexual. So just being queer or talking about being queer around children is seen as predatory or harmful to those children. And I really resent and hate these stereotypes and like thoughts that exist around queer people. And like Summer was saying, I think it is ultimately extremely harmful to the queer community for people to see us merely existing in public or even in private as inherently sexual, because it's not. It's just people being who they are and loving who they love.
Something that I want to touch upon is Peter Magyar. He, like said in the story, has not taken a clear stance on queer rights in Hungary or overturning the legislation Orban enacted while he was in office. He, though, has stated that he wants to have a good relationship with the U.S. and yet has not made any efforts to speak to the president, which I find very interesting. Many people critique him because his legislation seems to be very focused on economics and working with the EU as opposed to kind of helping the queer community in Hungary, which is in dire need of, not just Hungary, all over the world, which is in dire need of help and protection from people in office.
Welcome to this week's Trans News Break.
The Department of Education has announced its decision to end 5 agreements with school districts across the country that were created to protect the rights of transgender students.
The Associated Press reported that the 5 districts will not be federally obligated to uphold restaurant access protections and faculty training on pronoun use.
This now allows the individual boards to decide whether to keep following them, which, in the case of the Delaware Valley School District in Pennsylvania, ended anti-discrimination protections for trans students through a unanimous board vote in March.
A conservative parents group has announced a lawsuit against a Minnesota school district over its transgender bathroom policy, just a month after the Trump administration announced a lawsuit against Minnesota's Department of Education at large.
The parents' lawsuit alleges the new Richmond School District violated Title IX anti-discrimination laws by allowing trans students to use bathrooms that align with their gender identity.
New Richmond Parents for Strong Schools, in their lawsuit, say students have felt afraid to use bathrooms in school out of fear that an unnamed trans high schooler, quote, may be taking photos or videos of female students.
A new Maine ballot initiative that will appear during elections in November provides citizens of the state the decision on whether to allow transgender students to play on sports teams that match their gender identity.
After a citizen called on state legislators to adopt anti-trans sports restrictions in the state, the Maine legislature's Judiciary Committee decided to put the question to a ballot initiative instead of adopting the policy.
According to Maine's Democratic Governor Janet Mills and the Maine Principals Associations, there are only 2 high school student athletes competing in the entire state.
Caitlyn Jenner, a former Olympian and now right-wing trans activist, said that she feels like a, quote, hypocrite for accepting Glamour's Woman of the Year award in 2015.
While speaking to Tommy Lorraine on the Fox News-backed outlet Outkick, Jenner said, quote, "So I fought this battle from the Leah Thomas days until today, and I thought, what a hypocrite I am. Here I am fighting this battle, biological men out of women's sports. But back when I came out, what did I accept? Glamour's Woman of the Year award."
She continued by saying that she is biologically female, but genetically still XY.
The Montana State Supreme Court has ruled that 2 state agencies have violated the state's constitution over banning trans residents from changing their gender markers on ID documents.
The 5-2 decision blocked the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice from refusing to update gender markers for trans people.
The policy was first blocked in 2024, and the decision last Wednesday upholds the injunction and recognizes, quote, transgender discrimination is, by its very nature, sex discrimination.
Regarding the Department of Education's decision to end those agreements to protect the rights of transgender students at those with those school districts, well, first off, this kind of reminiscent of the whole leaving a federal matter up to the states thing. Like, when has that ever worked? I cannot help but think that the individual boards, the school boards, are just going to, I cannot help but think that they are just going to end those protections for their transgender students, which, I mean, at this point, I don't want to say goes without saying, but it is pretty much to be expected at this point. Although it is definitely concerning because without I doubt that without those agreements with the Department of Education, that they would have even bothered to have the conversation about how to protect the transgender students, or even to protect them at all.
I want to talk a little bit about the main ballot initiative that allows everyone in the state to vote on whether trans students should be playing in sports teams. I think that is so ridiculous. Like, first of all, there's literally 2 trans athletes in the entire state. So we're causing all of this ruckus over 2 people who want to play sports. I think this is just, I feel like we talk about this literally almost every single episode, but I think trans people in sports, especially kids, is like genuinely one of the stupidest hills to die on. It's one of the stupidest culture wars that waste so much time. It's ridiculous that voters even get to decide if a kid gets to play sports. That is absurd. It makes me so mad to even think about it. I don't know why anybody cares this much.
I guess the thing is that like nobody really cares that much either. You know, we see this like major push from the Republican Party to, you know, have everybody care so much, but you can't make people care about this very, very, very small group of people, you know, and that's why we keep seeing these, you know, victories of Democrats in places like, you know, Virginia or New Jersey, where these sort of notions have been pushed. Before we end off our show, here's Kaylee Desmarais with your Queerly Informed Sports Report.
5 women that are part of this year's class for the National Basketball Hall of Fame are openly queer athletes. Among them is 6-time WNBA star and Olympic gold medalist Shamik Holtzclaw, who has already been inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. Candace Parker is also joining the Hall of Famers, co-owner of the National Women's Soccer League team Angel City FC. She is also an Olympian with 2 gold medals under her belt, as well as being a 3-time WNBA champion. Candace has been married to fellow basketball player Anya Petrakova. Elena Della Dunn is also an Olympic gold winner and 7-time All-Star, and she is another one of these honorees. 2 more inductees round off the group, Cheryl Swoopers and Jennifer Azzi, both members of the 1996 U.S. National Olympic Team. Their induction is 30 years after their win over the Brazilian national team. The team is subject of the ESPN documentary Dream On and is known as one of the best teams of all time. The induction ceremony is scheduled for August 14th and 15th this year. I think it's honestly really iconic the way that Candace Parker came out publicly back in 2021, because she actually got married in 2019, and at the point of coming out and hard launching her relationship, they were already expecting their first child, and now they're married with 2 kids, and it's just a very happy story. It's a good thing to hear, and it's also just great to see these queer women getting their flowers. It's just a very positive way to round off sports right now. For your Queerly Informed Sports Report, I'm Kaylee Desmarais.
Thank you for tuning in to Queerly Informed this week here on 88.7 FM Radio Hofstra University, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thank you to the entire Queerly Informed team for your work on this week's edition.
Join us back here next week to hear the latest in queer news, as well as commentary from our group of LGBTQ reporters.
As always, if you have any suggestions for stories or content that you would like to hear, send them our way through email at queerlyinformedwrhu@gmail.com.
Thank you again to our entertainment reporter today, Bryana Neff, our historian, Brooklyn Dottin, and our sports reporter, Kaylee Desmarais, for their work on today's show.
For Queerly Informed, I'm Summer Savaria.
And I'm Xia Tuttle.
Thank you for tuning in.